Thank you for joining Anchor Collection's second virtual sales week. I said at the first one, really, after we couldn't go to IMEX, I'm like, oh, it doesn't mean we can't catch up and still do things together. So throughout this week, we've had webinars. This morning, we did something from Rome, which was kind of cool. You know, a little bit behind the scenes, and of one of the restaurants that Stanley Tucci had been to, and doing the cooking from there. So, and then we've got Spain and Portugal tomorrow, and then Mykonos on Thursday, and then during the day kind of catching up with one-on-one meetings with clients. So, but I'm very thankful that Karen agreed to join us this afternoon, as working with Remy-Cointreau as their Southwest brand ambassador, and obviously one of the brands within that is the Botanist. So iconic luxury, the Botanist, brand new bottle. Iconic luxury hotels is one of the brands that I represent, and we kind of made it fun having, instead of having gin and tonics, we do gin and iconics. So just a little play on words there. Very clever. Yeah, it's just fun, and obviously, you know, a very quintessential English brand as well with iconic luxury. And I just want to mention they just opened their newest hotel in London, the Mayfair Townhouse, which was due to open back in September. They tried to open and they got closed again. So they finally opened in the middle of May when everything could open in London. So right in the heart of Mayfair, and it's kind of got an Oscar Wilde theme to it because it's kind of in that Shepherd's Market area. So very, very cool. But I want to hand over to Karen, who's going to take us through some cocktail mixing, but also some education on gin and cocktails, just to finish off the day for us here. So I'm just going to spotlight Karen, and then we can see her a little better. There we go. Over to you. There you are.
Hi, thanks for joining today. I was just telling Cheryl that I haven't actually done a Zoom training in maybe 2 months since California's been reopened. So I'm thankful to be here today doing that with you. Welcome to my kitchen in West Hollywood. And yes, I am the Southwest Brand Ambassador, Portfolio Ambassador for Remy-Cointreau. We represent quite a few luxury brands, including the Botanist, as well as Bruichladdich, Isla Whiskey, Remy-Cointreau, the Botanist, Remy Martin, Cointreau, the Botanist. We have Metaxa from Greece, and we also have Mount Gay Rum, which is the oldest rum distillery in the world, located on Barbados. So I do love to talk about Bruichladdich and the Botanist. They are my favorite brands in the portfolio, if I were able to talk about them. And it definitely is just one of those very iconic brands for many a reason. But most recently, we just gained a B Corp certification. And if you're not familiar with what a B Corp is, it is a certification awarded to businesses or brands that put the well-being of their local area, their employees, and their communities first. And the Botanist and Bruichladdich, our parent whiskey brand, are the first gin and whiskey distilleries in Europe who have been awarded this. So we're very proud of that. And we love to just highlight that when we talk about the brand. So Cheryl also mentioned that quite a few of you were well-versed in spirits and gin, possibly in particular. So I'm not going to go into too much of Gin 101. I'm going to speak specifically to the brand. But if you do have some questions on gin production or the region of Isla that I am discussing, just pop something in the chat. Cheryl will hand over some questions to me. All right. And then we're going to make some cocktails. Absolutely. So I don't know if everyone's got cocktail mixings handy, but I will be demoing some cocktails, so feel free to mix along with me if you're interested. All right.
Sounds good. Mount Gay Rum, being a sailor, Mount Gay Rum's also one of my favorites. So
yes,
they too. Big brand with the sailing community.
The regatta every year is the biggest thing.
Yep.
Amazing. All right, so let's get going. So the Botanist Gin, just to give you an overview, typically when you think about gin, you'll think of the more the more popular, the more well-known style of gin, which is London Dry. This is the only gin that you will see right on the label says, ooh, if you can see it in the reflection, it says Isla Dry. So this gin is made in an English and in a London Dry style, which means that it is juniper forward, a little bit of citrus on the back notes, and a little dry on the finish. This one is made in that similar style, but we are proudly made on the island of Islay in Scotland. So that is just an iconic thing that we keep on the edge of our bottles to separate us from the rest. Botanist, it's a gin layered with complexity. There are 22 hand-forged botanicals that go into this bottle. I'll jump into that in a few minutes, but there's something really delicate and really quintessentially Islay with this brand. And we make sure to represent Islay in everything that we do. So the brand was started in 2011. It was born from our master distiller, Adam Hennett, who had joined the Bruichladdich distillery making whiskey with them about 3 years after they opened the distillery in 2001. So he and his mentor, Jim McEwen, who is responsible for quite a few of the most recognizable whiskey brands. He was part of Bowmore, he was part of Lafroig and Ardbeg, really recognizable brands on Islay for Islay whiskey. And they had decided, you know, to just take this wild leap and make a gin on Islay that represented all of the wild flora and fauna on the island. No, there was no one producing gin at the time. And them, along with a few botanists that lived on the island, they decided to put together this wild idea for making a gin. And we still actually employ 7 full-time botanists and foragers that go out and find all of our botanicals that go into this gin. So that's there cool. Sorry, was there a question?
Just saying, no, just said that's very cool that you employ the botanist rather than that it's all sourced locally, right?
Yeah, so the gin itself, the neutral grain spirit that's used for this gin is actually, it's from England, from right sort of around Birmingham, but so they bring in neutral spirit from England, but everything else that goes into the bottle, especially the water, is from Islay. So we call them the base tones, which are our 9 core botanicals. Pretty similar to many other gins of the style. There's cassia, lemon, angelica root, orange peel, dried coriander, orris root, cinnamon, licorice, and of course juniper. That will give us that base botanical blend. And then we added the 22 hand-forged botanicals that make up sort of the rounder, softer, more floral notes of our gin. And 22 is a lot. There's not many gins out there that are using quite as many botanicals, but I will say that when Jim and Adam were first developing the recipe for this, there were a lot more. We have a full-time forager whose name is James Brown. He's a wonderful man. His name is James Brown. He's heard all the jokes. But so he actually brought 48 botanicals that are grown all across the island, and they tried all of them. They made separate distillates with each and every botanical, painstakingly blended each one until 22 were chosen for it. And I have made it my mission while in lockdown to memorize all 22. I won't bore them with you. I won't bore you with them unless you want me to. But the 22 are, they're mostly flowers and wild roots. Notably, there are 3 separate types of mint that are grown only in Scotland: sweet mint, apple mint, and meadow sweet mint. So those ones definitely come through. There is quite a note of mint in this gin. And it just delivers all of the backbone that we need to create this really beautiful floral gin that also has a really beautiful mixability to it. So it can be enjoyed neat, best in cocktails. As far as distillation goes, I'm not quite sure how familiar everyone is with the process of distillation for gin. So if I am going way over your head, just shoot a note, raise your hand, I'll stop and explain. But so gin as a process typically starts with a neutral grain spirit. There are not many gin distilleries that are processing their own grains and making their own neutral spirit, which will then be infused with botanicals. So as I said earlier, our neutral grain spirit comes from England, a little bit around the Birmingham area, which is interesting because it's quite an industrial area, but we use 100% English wheat for that. And then we load all of our botanicals, our core botanicals, into the drum of our Lohmann still. So a Lohmann still, typically when you make gin, you'll use a large copper pot still. If you've been to a distillery ever in your life, you've seen one, you've seen them all. They're sort of bottom heavy round containers with a long neck over the top called the lane arm. But our Lohmann still was actually recovered from a distillery in Inverness in Scotland, and it was used to make some really complex but light whiskeys. And this distillery was closing down. They were taking everything apart, but they had such a strange, interesting still that Jim McEwen and Adam Hannett, our distillers, decided to take and repurpose for this gin specifically because they have such a history with making whiskeys. So the Lohmann still, unlike the copper pot still, which has a wide, heavy base and a skinny arm with a curve, this one has a wide, heavy base with an equally wide neck. So it's basically, it's quite an ugly still. And we like to call this still Ugly Betty. She's proudly emblazoned with her name on the line arm, but it's basically just a very large copper apparatus with an equally thick neck. So she's called Ugly Betty. But this type of still was developed after the Second World War. It was sort of an experimental cross between a column and a pot still, which was meant to meet the growing demand for single malt scotches. So this could create something as delicate as a gin and as complex as a single malt whiskey. So within this neck, which is unique to the Botanist distillery, is that there are removable sections inserted in the neck, and what creates the alcoholic vapors and catches them and condenses them are these sections called plates. And these ones, because they can be removed and shaped and sort of tilted, each surface within the still will create a different flavor of our gin. So as we add some or all of the 22 botanicals in our gin, they create a different flavor. Following?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
All right, amazing. So basically, because of this wide neck and the removable neck sections, it creates just different flavors and more versatility in our gin. Our distillation process is self-described as a slow and painstaking process. We typically like to hold the temperature of our spirit at a much lower degree than many other London dry style gins. Because a lot of our core botanicals are loaded in and distilled first, we have the opportunity to lower the temperature a little bit and be mindful to our more delicate herbs and flowers that will go in next. So they're loaded into the pot at the bottom in a particular order and spread using rakes to sort of form a mat that sits on the top of the liquid. So you're almost like steeping tea. And then these botanicals are steeped for 12 hours before the steam pressure is increased and then comes to a simmer. And then they start to rise up the neck of that very heavily modified Ugly Betty. These rising vapors will cluster, they'll condense, and then they will hit a water box at the edge of the still, which will then cool the vapors and causes a reflux of all those heavy oils in all of our botanicals that have tried to escape the copper, condensed back into a liquid, and collected to make our gin. So these final stages through the line arm in the neck of our still are collected in 3 separate parts. Nothing in the distillery is automated. So each part, which we like to call the heads, the hearts, and the tails, have to be collected by hand and tasted to ensure that they are at the right alcoholic level to be taken for what will then become our gin. So the heads of any distillate is mostly ethanol, definitely not safe to drink. So you let those very, very heavily alcoholic vapors that have condensed, you take those, and those are transferred to waste. Then you'll be able at a certain point to tell when that alcoholic liquid is optimal, and that is what's taken for our hearts. And that is what ends up becoming the Botanist Gin. And then towards the end, we have our tails, which are low in ABV, too low to be used for our gin, and those will be recycled back into our neutral grain spirit to begin the process all over again.
So what happens to the plants and herbs that are in the gin, or the botanicals? What do you do with those?
So those are then turned into mulch, and those are for quite a few of the greenhouses on the distillery property. And then for whatever is safe to be reused is put back into the soil.
Okay.
But a lot of it is used for compost, because once those are all boiled, because it hasn't condensed in the distillation pot where it's being held, those have not been turned. It's just like tea leaves that have been steeped.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, so distillation will take anywhere from 12 to 14 hours, depending on temperature, outside influences. We'll typically get about 9,000 liters per batch, which will make 240,000 bottles of the Botanist Gin. And once that comes off the still, when spirit comes off the still, it is completely clear. So anything, including whiskey, including rum, will always be same color as this before it's introduced to barrel for aging. And it will come off the still at about 96.5 ABV. And then post-distillation, once we have our hearts, it will be at 80% ABV and 46% after being watered down with Isla spring water for bottling. So what you enjoy will definitely not be cask strength, so it is palatable, and delicious. Any questions so far?
There's a couple, but you've answered them. One was how long does the whole process take? So
okay.
Yeah. So you want that straight afterwards.
Oh yeah, there. Now I see them. Great. All right. Well, I'm going to pour myself a sip of gin so we can talk about tasting notes. If you have any with you, I encourage you to. If not, I will do my best to explain. All right, so because of the 22 botanicals, there's obviously a lot going on in this gin, and there's a lot of layered complexity. So with this gin, you'll see a little bit, I doubt you can see it on your screen right now, but there's quite a bit of oil that sits around the edge of the glass, mostly from those botanicals, definitely from the orange peel that's in the core botanicals. And it just sort of creates this really beautiful texture that's perfect for cocktails, perfect for sipping neat if you'd like. It holds up in effervescence, so it's perfect for a gin and tonic or an effervescent soda. And it's just, it's really delicate, and you sort of smell like you should be out in the, it smells like it should be out in the countryside. You should be in a garden or on a picnic when you're drinking this. And it's just very elegant. It just belongs in an elegant setting. So the nose, you'll definitely, you'll smell a lot of that juniper right off the bat because it is done in a London dry style or our Isla dry gin style. You get a little bit of like aniseed, some lemon and orange peel, and definitely some honey from the thistle, you know, summer flowers. It's just a really beautiful, beautiful aroma on this. So on the palate, it's definitely not as floral as it smells. All of those floral notes are really contained in the aroma, but on the palate, you get a lot more of those base notes. You get that coriander, that cinnamon, that cassia, that orange. It just sort of stays, it stays on your palate and it really coats it. And then this finish will definitely have a little bit of that seashore sort of flavor. You'll get a little bit of salinity too, which I always find really interesting.
And a question here, Karen, what's the best if you're just doing a good gin and tonic? Which is the best tonic to pair it with, like a Fever Tree or a Fentimans, or what's your recommendation?
I love this question. It's definitely a regional thing, and it's how you enjoy your gin and tonics. I am a massive fan of Fever Tree, so I will say Fever Tree. Fever Tree has a little bit less sugar in it as far as tonic goes, but there's some really beautiful flavored ones from East Imperial. That's another really great tonic. I also love Q Mixers. They're, I believe they have a grapefruit tonic that's really lovely.
Interesting.
I
think in the Fever Tree, the aromatic one, the slightly pink one, or the elderflower is kind of a fun one as well.
The elderflower is lovely. The aromatic one is interesting because I think it's based on a pink gin, which is a very old style way of drinking gin, where it's just Angostura bitters. But they sort of take that sort of premise to it, and it feels like you're having an Angostura and soda. So I always think it's great for an upset stomach. Although you probably if you had an upset stomach. So yeah. So aside from that, there's quite a few ways that we enjoy our botanist. We definitely want to take into consideration all of the botanicals from Isla, the craftsmanship from Isla. The beautiful spring water. Like I said, this gin is elegant. It's meant for cocktails. So when I make cocktails with the botanist, I like to keep them focused to the gin itself. I'm not quite sure how everyone drinks their gin in this group, but I did prepare a couple of cocktails, really simple ones that you can make at home that still highlight the gin and don't bury it. The botanist does have the legs to stand on, but I always want to make sure that we can really taste the botanist in our cocktails. I just saw a question come in though. Oh, the two tonics I mentioned. What did I say? Oh, Q Mixers is a great one. I'm not sure of the availability in Canada. Sorry for those joining from Canada. And then East Imperial.
I don't know that one.
East Imperial is lovely.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, I mean, like I was saying, the way I like to enjoy my cocktails, the philosophy of the botanist, it is a part of the premium spirits category, but it really transcends that because we work so closely with local foragers and we employ 90% of our employment at the Botanist are people who are born and raised on Isla. There is a specific focus to Scotland, to the island itself, a high provenance for local and foraged ingredients, and it really speaks to a place and a culture. So the Botanist is just unapologetically Scottish, specifically Isla. But and yeah, we try to make sure that we focus on that when we are making cocktails with it. So that being said, I can make some cocktails for you now if you'd like. We can just run through these.
Let's go ahead. Go ahead. I'm getting thirsty.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Feel free to unmute yourself and speak if you don't want to.
I'm going to go grab some ice.
Okay, you go and grab some ice.
It's quick. Has anyone had the Botanist before this? Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Have you had it in a hotel, in a cocktail bar?
I think I must have first had it in Scotland, and then I probably bought it on the way home or something.
Great. Love to hear that. Nobody else?
I probably drank it in London bars or someplace.
Yeah.
So from someone who has never had it, is it available here at our liquor stores or
Where are you
Bevmo?
located?
Pardon?
Where are you located?
California.
Yes, the Botanist is everywhere. There's quite a few of the higher end liquor stores around Southern California that feature it most often. It's definitely in BevMo, it's in K&L, but it is definitely in liquor stores, and it's definitely a favorite in Southern California as far as cocktail bars go.
Got it.
All right, so I think let's start with an easy one. Let's start with a martini. I don't know if you can see. I'm gonna try to move so everybody can see what I'm doing, but a martini is a particularly personal cocktail for me. I remember the first time I asked my husband to order me a martini while I went to go use the restroom at a bar. He later told me that he had an absolute panic attack because he wasn't sure how I liked my martini. It's a very personal thing. So I'm going to show you how to make a classic martini. Although I will say that my favorite style of drinking a martini is a 50-50, where we'll have equal parts of gin and dry vermouth with some orange bitters. But for learning purposes, we're going to go with a classic martini today. So a classic martini is 2-to-1, and simply that is 2 ounces of gin, 1 ounce of, half an ounce of vermouth, and a couple of dashes of orange bitters. For those of us in Canada, you'll go 50 mil and 50 mil and 15 mil. So I'm going to take my gin and add 2 ounces to my strainer. If you'll notice, my mixing glass is made just like the bottle. And on the bottle here, all of these letters and words are all of the Latin names for the 22 botanicals in the bottle. So then I'm going to add half an ounce of dry vermouth. If you'd like to have a little bit more of a wet martini, maybe something a little lower in ABV, you can take this to 1.5 ounces and 1.5 ounces, 45 mil, 45 mil, and go from there. And then add 2 dashes of orange bitters. The bitters I'm using today are actually Sue's bitters. Unfortunately, I don't think that they're available anymore. I got this from the distillery itself. They were a gift. So if you can't find these, I'm very sorry. But another good substitute is Regan's or Fee's, which are both readily available. So, pardon me, grab myself a spoon. And that's it. One of the most simple cocktails to build, but most temperamental cocktails to get right. Martinis definitely rely on technique in stirring, and it definitely relies on making sure your temperature is appropriate. And the one thing I forgot was a spoon to mix it with, so come back around for that. So
you stir it, don't shake it?
No, I don't shake my martinis. And the reason why I don't shake my martinis is, especially when you're using a really delicate gin or gin in general, there's a lot of those sort of oily flavors that will then cause your cocktail and your martini to cloud. And it will switch up the molecular structure of your cocktail, actually, and it will make it taste a little dusty and almost bruised, and you sort of break up all those oils that are put into the gin for texture. So when you shake a martini made with gin, you actually disrupt all of those flavors and textures. So for a vodka martini, I'll typically shake it because I want it as cold as possible. But with a gin martini, I will always stir it.
Okay,
so
good to know. Who knew?
Yeah, and a little bit of technique. If you do have a bar spoon handy, these sort of flat, long spoons, the technique I always like to teach people is to hold their spoon sort of like you would a chopstick, where you would fit your second chopstick under here, and you have 2 fingers on the front, 2 fingers on the back, and your thumb to stabilize. And you want to keep this back of the spoon against the back of the glass, and you do a push-pull motion. And that way you're stirring it and you're getting that ice properly incorporated. But if I stop speaking, it's pretty silent. So you're not disturbing the gin, you're not shaking it up, you're not adding any air bubbles to it. You're just simply diluting it with water and making it as cold as possible to give you that really beautiful velvety texture. Because typically cocktails are loud. So I'm gonna let this sit for a moment while this cooks, and I'm gonna cut my garnish. So on my gin martinis, I'm pretty partial to both an olive and a lemon peel. If I am drinking a 50-50 martini with a classic dry martini, a lemon peel is all I need. And when you're peeling lemons for a cocktail, you just want to make sure that you only have pith and you don't get any of those the segments of your lemon. That acid will definitely disrupt the balance of your cocktail as well. So, did spend the last 16 years of my career behind a bar, so it's always really special when I get to come back and make cocktails. So from there, I'm going to use a Hawthorne strainer just to hold the ice back. And you'll see there's no bruising in my cocktail. There's no air bubbles. There's no ice chips. Just a really beautiful velvety color, almost opalescent, if you can see it. And then we'll take our swath of lemon and give it a little spritz at a sort of 45-degree angle from the glass. And it just really will capture all the oils that are trapped in that lemon. And there you have it. That is a dry gin martini.
Cheers.
Karen,
Now I'm thirsty.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Go ahead. Yeah.
You mentioned temperature that was really important. How do we know what temperature?
Well, if you're nerdy, and I've worked at quite a few nerdy cocktail bars, sometimes you can actually take the temperature of your cocktail. We used to have a temperature gun that was typically used by the chefs to measure their ovens, but we would take temperatures and get it down to 21 degrees quite often. And it won't freeze, obviously, because it's alcohol, but we would try to get it to that optimal temperature. But we do that also by making sure our glasses, our stirring glasses and our cocktail glasses came out of a freezer as well. So you basically only want to shake or stir a cocktail enough to get it cold enough and to get it diluted enough. Optimally, with a cocktail that is served up or neat, like a Manhattan, a martini, a daiquiri, you want to add anywhere between 1 ounce to 1.5 ounces of water to properly dilute the cocktail so that it's palatable to drink and you're not just drinking straight booze. Because it's when a cocktail is strong, it doesn't necessarily mean it's good. It can be strong, but it could be perfectly delicious and palatable. Sound good?
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
No problem. All right, shall we move on? Let's make a bee's knees. A bee's knees is another really simple cocktail that I love, and it packs a whole lot of flavor for 3 ingredients. I also feel like I'm going to attract bees in this outfit today, so it's perfect. Let's do it. So for this cocktail, you need 3 ingredients. You need lemon, you need honey, and you need a really good gin. So my honey, I don't know if anyone's ever tried to make cocktails with honey before, but it's a big sticky mess and it is impossible to measure out appropriately. It'll stick to your vessel. It will stick to your measuring jigger. So I like to dilute my honey 2 parts to 1, 2 parts honey, 1 part boiling water, give it a little stir, and then it'll sort of settle down. So I'm going to start with my lemon juice, and we have our lemon and honey in equal parts. So I'm going to measure out 3/4 ounce of lemon juice. And typically you will get 1/2 ounce of juice for every half citrus. So right now I've got exactly 1/2 ounce. So I'm going to squeeze just a little bit more and get 3/4. And then pop that right into my shaker. Apologies, I did not realize anyone couldn't see. And then I'm going to take my diluted honey, and again in equal parts, pour that straight into the jigger as well. And then our gin. And I'm going to pour that at 2 ounces about 55 to 60 ml. So then we can add our ice. And this one, because it has citrus and it has a sweetening agent, you definitely want to shake this. If you were to stir or just, pour these ingredients over ice, they would never mix properly, and they would never truly incorporate with one another. So you want to add ice, and you want to add this to a mixing tin, not only to shake it and not only to mix it and to make it cold, but to also introduce oxygen to it. So when you shake a cocktail, a lot of times you can see people just sort of apathetically shaking it. That'll definitely do the trick in getting it cold. You won't get a lot of dilution out of it, but what you want is to shake it in a manner that has the cocktail roll throughout the inside of this shaker, and it'll create air bubbles, which will then make your citrus more bright. It will make your sugar expand, and just allow the cocktail to be really balanced. So when I shake, I like to fully extend my arms and make sure that I hit 3 separate points of this so that my cocktail is constantly moving. So I can feel that my cocktail is ready because my fingers are sticking to this tin. It is quite cold. So, and if you can also see into my tin, you can see that there's a sort of a white foam over the top, and that's all of the air we've just introduced into our cocktail. So I'm going to strain this cocktail out. Sorry, I'm playing with your visuals. So strain this out with a Hawthorne strainer, basically just to hold back any of those ice chips. And this is a bee's knees. Very light, very lovely, very easy drinking for a weekend, Sunday brunch, all of those things.
Tuesday afternoon.
Tuesday at 4:41 p.m. Any questions about shaking technique?
It's not as sweet as I thought it would be.
No, and it would be sweet. One, if you didn't dilute your honey. Right. And it would definitely be sweet if you were using, if you were not shaking it and just building it over ice. So yeah, it's definitely not sweet. It's perfectly in balance. That cocktail, it follows the algorithm of a sour, and a sour is equal parts of sweet and sour, and then bolstered by strong.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when do you chill your glasses?
So typically before I ever make a cocktail, my cocktail will be in the freezer right before I'm ready to go. The good thing is that if you're using a sturdy cocktail glass, anything that's specifically made for cocktails won't break when they freeze. So they didn't make it in the freezer before this, but typically these would always be in the freezer. I will say I had a cocktail party last night, so I had to take them out of the dishwasher.
My boyfriend's a martini drinker, and he always has martini glasses in the freezer.
Yeah, my husband too. It's just the way. It's the way if you want to make cocktails at home. Diluted honey is a great tip. Yeah, it's impossible to pour honey into a cocktail. You'll end up missing all of your sweetness because half of it will be left in the jar and half of it will be left on your spoon or vessel, whatever you use to get it in there.
So I'm going to ask like the taboo question.
Right.
If you want to use something different than honey, can you for a sweetener? I mean, what is the alternate, if any?
So it wouldn't be a bee's knees without honey, but I made a quick mention earlier to an algorithm for cocktails called a sour. So every cocktail that you've ever had in your life, no matter where you've had it, when you've had it, is based off of cocktail families. And I actually do a really long showcase about this at Tales of the Cocktail and quite a few other drinks industry seminars. There's a cocktail family for every cocktail. So a sour is what we would think of when we order a daiquiri or a mojito or even a paloma. So a gimlet is a sour. So basically the makeup of it is, if you think of it as a pie chart, you'll split it in half 1/2 is the spirit, and then you'll split 2/4 between sweet and sour. So you can mix that with anything you'd like. So if I wanted to make a daiquiri, it would be lime juice, simple syrup, and rum. If I wanted to make a gimlet, it would be this build, lime juice, simple syrup, and gin. So if you wanted to make something with gin and lemon juice and you didn't want to use honey, you can substitute simple syrup for it. You can substitute maple syrup for it, which is lovely. Just add a couple of dashes of bitters and it's delicious. You can use any sweetener you'd like, agave, whatever. It all just follows that family. As long as you keep it in balance, it'll taste delicious.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem. But I will note, if you are substituting citrus, like if you wanted to use orange juice or grapefruit juice, those do not have the same acidity levels as limes or lemons. So I would definitely always add a touch of those stronger acidic citrus fruits to it. So if you want to use something with grapefruit, bolster it with a little lime or a little lemon just to kick that up. Otherwise, it'll fall flat. All right.
Thank you. Great.
I think we've got time for one more. So I wanted to pull out sort of an obscure cocktail that not a ton of people know unless you've worked in a classic cocktail bar. This is one of my favorites. It is also the inspiration for one of my favorite bars in New York's name, the Pegu Club. Has anyone ever had a Pegu Club?
No.
Okay. So this cocktail, like I said, it is the name of my favorite bar in New York City. If you haven't been, go to the Pegu Club. It is incredible. It is honestly the first bar I sat at and said, I want to do this. It was definitely my inspiration. But the Pegu Club, first mentioned in Harry Craddock's Savoy cocktail book in 1930. So this one is a take on a sour again. So this one will feature lime juice, some simple syrup, and gin, with the addition of a blend of 2 bitters, both Angostura and orange. So sorry, there's a siren outside my house right now. So if you make cocktails at home, typically these are the ingredients you will have in your house already. So pretty simple. I always suggest, if you're interested in starting to make cocktails, is to definitely get yourself a set of bitters. So again, I'm using Sue's orange bitters, but Fee's or Regan's are really popular ones, and then Angostura. So I will tilt you back down. There we go. Okay, so the way I like to build cocktails is I like to start with my smallest ingredients first, smallest increment ingredients first. That way, if I mess up or I change my mind, I'm not tossing out my 2 ounces of gin. I'm starting with these first. So I'll add 4 dashes of Angostura. And I will note, I'm adding 4 because I'm using a measured dasher. So if you're using this from an Angostura bottle, I would just do 1 good dash. And then orange bitters, 2 dashes there. I'm then going to add 1/2 ounce of simple syrup. And I'm using 1/2 ounce here rather than the typical 3/4 that I've been doing because I actually like this cocktail a little bit drier because I've added a little bit of florality with my bitters here. So I know that I want to add 3/4 of an ounce of lime juice. So I'm going to squeeze that right into my jigger. And same with a lemon, you'll get about 1/2 ounce per side, depending, or per half, depending on the size of your limes. So I'm pouring that straight into my jigger here and into the tin. And then I will continue on with the Botanist here. And I will pour 2 ounces straight in. So it is nearly the exact same build as the bee's knees, just with the addition of some bitters. And we've swapped the lemon for lime, the honey for simple syrup, which if you haven't made simple syrup at home, it is so easy. It is equal parts by volume, just white sugar and warm water. You don't have to boil it. You don't have to cook it. There are no solid pieces of sugar left, and let that cool. Simple as can be.
It's kind of fun making flavored. So
Say
it's
that
kind
again?
of fun making flavored. It's kind of fun making flavored syrups as well. I got into
Yeah.
last year. I made a rosemary one. I made a lavender flavored one. They're kind of fun to do.
Yes, and Brenda, I did use simple syrup and not Cointreau. Cointreau is the original recipe for this. I wanted to just make this a little simpler for those of us at home if you were going to be making cocktails with us at home. But this cocktail does have Cointreau in it typically. Again, I was not sure if everyone was going to have all ingredients at home, but typically this cocktail would have half an ounce of Cointreau in it rather than simple syrup. So the reason why I used half an ounce of simple syrup rather than 3/4 is because it is supposed to be quite a dry cocktail because there is no actual sugar in it, just a liqueur. But good catch, I like that. All right, so again, I'm gonna shake this to add some air and dilution. And again, I know that it is done because it is cold to the touch. Again, I've got a nice frothy aeration in my cocktail. Here you go. And this one has sort of like a lovely tint of peach from the bitters and from the Cointreau if it was in there. And there you have it. So this one I typically garnish with a little lime wedge or a lime medallion if you were going to cut them in circles and throw that right on top. Cheers.
I think that's my favorite.
Yeah, this one's my favorite too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice.
Great.
I like it because it's kind of fresh, but it's not sweet. It's got a really good flavor to it.
Yeah, and this one definitely highlights the dryness of the gin, again, which is why I brought down the simple syrup a little bit when I substituted it for Cointreau. And then I see the Botanist I hope the Botanist is available in Toronto. It definitely is available in Toronto. I know that for a fact. Any other questions while I have y'all?
I have a question, and you may have addressed it. I apologize, I was late. But
Okay.
I know you're using the Botanist gin. Does the gin matter? And I imagine it does, but and if you covered it, I'm sorry for the duplication, but I came in on late.
No, that's all right. 100% the gin matters. You will know if you're drinking a good gin versus, and I'd never say a gin was bad, an inexpensive gin. You'll definitely taste the difference. You'll find that some more commercially made gins will be quite astringent. And there's some really beautiful gins out there that really do focus on the botanical builds. And each gin has their own family style. As I think you did miss this earlier, but there are 22 hand-forged botanicals in the recipe for the Botanist, in addition to the 9 core that make it our gin specifically. Each of those botanicals are hand-forged on the island of Isla, where our gin is made. So each flavor is very intentional. And the cocktails I like to make with the Botanist are intentional as well to sort of pair with those flavors.
I think it's interesting that you can get a less expensive gin and somebody that pours a tonic out of the gun.
Yeah.
And then you can get a good gin and a good tonic. And it's such a difference.
Well, yeah.
And
I mean, that is all preference. There has definitely been a night or two where I have been somewhere where all I wanted was, you know, a gun gin and tonic. And sometimes that is the vibe we're going for.
Yeah.
But when we're sort of discussing luxury and luxury destination, luxury dining, you want something that you know is intentionally crafted and made a particular way. Honestly, it's what drew me to the brand before I worked with them. I was mentioning to Cheryl before everyone got on, I had actually been brought to the distillery before I worked for the company. I was just a bright-eyed bartender, and I have been in love with the brand ever since. Everything they do is intentional. It is done with purpose, and it is done to highlight Isla, which is very important. So your gin.
One question. A question on there from Kathy: is a good balloon glass good for important for a gin and tonic?
I love how the Brits always have it in a balloon glass, right?
Yeah.
I do that at home now after being there so many times, but you don't find bars here doing that yet.
It's a big European thing. A lot of places in Europe, you'll have it in a kind of big balloon glass.
Yeah, that's a Spanish style gin and tonic. And typically that's meant to accommodate additional botanicals that are added. So you'll see with those balloon glasses, a lot of time it'll have quite a bit of garnish. And that's sort of, tailoring the experience, like adding a little bit of freshness. There'll be citrus, there'll be herbs, there'll be sometimes juniper, black pepper. But with glasses like those, it's actually more surface area for the tonic and the bubbles to spread out on. There's a lot of science and there's a lot of chemistry that goes along with making cocktails. I surmise that that's why the term mixologist came up, because it is a science, and those who do it well really do understand the science of why they do things. So those glasses are really great for a gin and tonic if you really want to be able to take in a lot of the aromas that go along with it. But if you're drinking a gin and tonic from a gun and a cheap bottle, I'd say you can skip the glass.
It's not going to make a lot of difference. It's not going to make
You're
any
usually
better.
a few in by that point.
Yeah, no, it won't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like fine wine.
And that
First glass
and
has to
that's-
be really good. The second, and then it kind of goes, by the end of the night, it could be little penguin for all I knew.
Yeah.
and that's the place where you go and say, what type of wines do you have? And they'll be like,
Yeah.
I've got a Chardonnay or a white Zinfandel. And you'll be, I'll have a gin and tonic.
When the gins are not listed and it's just gin, you know what you're in for.
Yeah. But I love the fact now, I mean, as a gin drinker, I love the fact there's more places now that you can have like the gin and tonic menu, mixing different gins with the different tonics. And that's been around in Europe for a number of years now. And I think we're seeing it more over here now, but it's not as prevalent as it is in Europe.
Yeah, and I think this stems from, there is quite a wide variety of gins that are available. Not only, gins that are staples from where they're from, like, Beefeater or Tanqueray is to London, or Plymouth, those styles. There's so many gins that are made regionally now that are highlighting different flavors and different locales. And now there's just as many tonics on the market too. So I like the idea of people really understanding what makes their gin flavorful and pairing it with a tonic or a soda that amplifies that. I will say, besides for my brand, I know somebody had mentioned Fever Tree Elderflower. The Elderflower and the Tanqueray 10 is delicious.
With Botanist Gin, is lime the preferred garnish? Like how some, like, you can have certain gins with a Mediterranean tonic and they think that it should be a lemon wedge more than a lime. Which is the purest way to do, or the suggested way with?
So for us, actually, we quite lean towards herbs for our gin and tonics, because there are 22 of them. We typically like to focus on maybe some thyme, some tarragon, some dill in this is really lovely, but a lemon twist and some thyme or some mint is really beautiful in a gin and tonic for this.
Interesting. That's I love lime and mint together. That'd be a good one.
Yeah, it's good.
Exchangeable. Yeah. Interesting. Cool. Any other questions?
Well, this is wonderful.
I was gonna say I've made it my mission in lockdown to memorize all 22, and I think I've got it.
Go for it. Okay, list them.
I'm gonna try to go alphabetical. Apple mint, chamomile, creeping thistle, which is a thyme, downy birch, elder, not elderflower, elder, gorse, hawthorn, heather, juniper. There is a second style of juniper in our gin. The next couple of ones are, lady's bedstraw, lemon balm, meadowsweet and mugwort, red clover, spearmint, sweet cecily, bog myrtle, tansy, and watermint.
Oh,
Wow.
I think you should take every opportunity to give those out because they're such wonderful words. So I think you should.
Great. A lot of them are
telling
It sounds
everybody
like some.
those.
It sounds like something out of Harry Potter.
I was
Mugwort.
just going to say
Mugwort. That is the most wonderful word, isn't it? Mugwort.
Mugwort is great. Mugwort's actually a really beautiful tea for detoxifying. I know a lot of spas use it in their facial treatments. But yeah, sweet cecily and bog myrtle were ones I had to look up. You know, heather, juniper, lemon balm, chamomile, apple mint. All of those are just like, you can imagine what they taste like.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. It's interesting about the foraging. One of the properties I represent in Scotland, Canda Craig, near Balmoral, their director of sales and marketing is a Scottish gilly, and her speciality is also foraging. So it's something they do from the house there. And but you find things in Scotland that you're not going to find anywhere else in the world.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Well, I just want to say thank you so much to Karen
This was
for
wonderful.
all your
Thank you.
information.
Thank you.
Yay! Just, you know, fun, but so educational as well. And that's what I find doing.
Oh,
is
yeah,
we learn so
I
much.
learned
Things
so-
that we drink, but yeah. We learn a lot, which is
You
great.
do.
And
yeah.
and thank you to the ladies for joining this afternoon.
Yeah,
that was fun.
Thank you for the
Very fun.
invitation.
So-
Really good. Cheryl,
Thank
what
you.
was
You're welcome.
the hotel you mentioned right at the very start? You said it had like an Oscar Wilde vibe.
The Mayfair Townhouse.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just opened in London. So it's the newest addition to iconic luxury hotels.
Oh, great.
So
Okay.
yeah, I'm looking
I
forward to
actually
going to
just read
see
an
it when I
article
could.
somewhere.
It was just written up in like, I think Forbes magazine, and there's a couple of places because it's just opened. It's probably one of the hottest openings in London at the moment. So really looking forward to when I can actually go and see it.
Oh, I know.
You and me both.
Yeah. Well, hopefully soon. Hopefully they'll open up the quarantine soon. So I'm not going till after the quarantine, but thank you so much, ladies. It was
Thank
a
you.
lovely
Thank
to
you,
see you
Karen.
all.
I will be sure to
Thank you,
have a
Karen.
Botanist gin and tonic.
Thank you,
on
Cheryl.
Friday.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Cheryl. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye.
evening. Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.